It's 11 p.m. and you're deep inside a tutorial for something that has nothing to do with your job. Last month it was photography. Before that, coding. Before that, psychology, music theory, a language you may never use. You have 5 unfinished projects, a browser full of tabs from 5 different worlds, and one question that keeps circling back. Why can't I just pick one thing? Everyone around you seems to have a lane. They introduce themselves in one word. I'm a designer. I'm an accountant. I'm a lawyer. And when someone asks what you do, you freeze because the honest answer is a list. Most people look at you and see someone unfocused, a jack of all trades, master of none. They tell you to specialize, to stop starting things, to finally commit. But the truth is the exact opposite. That restless curiosity you keep apologizing for is not a lack of discipline. According to the psychology of Polymaths, it is one of the most reliable patterns found in the people who reach the very top of their fields. Your multiple interests are not the reason you're behind. Used correctly, they are an unfair advantage almost no one teaches you to use. Welcome back to Psych Tunes. Today, we're going to break down the psychology of the polymath, the person with many interests, sometimes called a multi-potentialite. We'll look at what the research actually says about minds like yours, the 3 unfair advantages you're carrying without knowing it, and how to stop scattering that gift and start compounding it. Let's get started. First, let's give this pattern its real name because it is not a flaw with a nickname. It is a documented profile. Psychology calls it polymathy, the serious pursuit of multiple fields across a lifetime. And the strongest evidence for its power comes from an unexpected place, the biographies of Nobel Prize winners. The researchers Robert and Michelle Root-Bernstein spent years studying the lives of laureates in science, literature, economics, and peace. They compared them to ordinary members of their professions, and they found something that should have made global headlines. Nobel laureates were far more likely than their less famous colleagues to have serious interests outside their field. They painted, they played instruments, they wrote poetry, built crafts, studied subjects that had nothing to do with their prize. The average laureate maintained real engagement in more than 2 separate areas of knowledge and practice. And here is the part that matters most. Many of them said this was not an accident. They described their side interests as a deliberate strategy, the fuel for their best ideas. The people at the absolute peak of human achievement were not the most narrow, they were the most broad. So, how does this actually work inside the mind? Why would learning photography make you better at business? Or studying music make someone a better chemist? The machinery has a name: transfer. Your brain does not store what you learn in sealed boxes. Every field you enter teaches you more than facts. It teaches you patterns, structures, ways a problem can be shaped. And when you carry a pattern from one world into another, you can suddenly see a solution that the people trapped inside that world cannot see, because to them it looks brand new and to you it looks familiar. Meanwhile, something very different is happening in the mind of the pure specialist. The researcher Eric Dane described it in the Academy of Management Review with a term worth remembering: cognitive entrenchment. The deeper someone goes into a single domain, the more stable their mental map of it becomes. That stability makes them fast, but it also makes them rigid. They stop questioning the map. They start rejecting anything that doesn't fit it. Their expertise slowly hardens into a cage. Think of it like farming. A field planted with a single crop is efficient right up until one disease arrives that the crop can't resist, and the whole field dies in a season. A forest is messier, slower, harder to explain. But a forest survives almost everything because nothing can wipe out that much variety at once. The specialist is the single crop. You are the forest. But maybe you're thinking, if breadth is so powerful, why does my path feel so slow? Why do I feel behind everyone who picked a lane at 22? Here, the research has something almost comforting to say. In 2022, the scientists Arndt at Gillick, Brooke McNamara, and David Hambrick published a massive analysis of more than 6,000 athletes, including hundreds of the best performers on the planet. The finding flipped decades of advice on its head. The world-class athletes were usually not the kids who specialized early. They were the kids who sampled. They played multiple sports, started their main sport later, and listen to this, they progressed more slowly at the beginning than the athletes who peaked at the national level and stopped there. The same researchers pointed to the identical pattern in science. Nobel laureates had broader training and slower early progress than colleagues who won smaller awards. Slow early progress was not the mark of the losers. It was the signature of the people playing the longest game. So, if your 20s or 30s feel like a mess of exploring, restarting and switching, you may not be falling behind at all. You may simply be in your sampling period, the exact phase the greatest performers went through before anyone knew their names. You are not late, you are loading. Now, let's get specific. Here are the 3 unfair advantages you are carrying right now. Advantage 1, you can import ideas. Picture a meeting where a team has been stuck on the same problem for weeks. Everyone in the room has the same degree, the same training, the same mental map, which means they are all searching the same small territory. Then, someone connects the to something from a completely different world. A principle from biology, a trick from game design, a structure from storytelling, and the room goes quiet because it works. That move has a name in psychology, far transfer, carrying a solution across the border between 2 unrelated fields. Specialists can't make that move, not because they aren't smart, but because you can't import from a country you've never visited. Every interest you've ever pursued is a border you've crossed. Your so-called scattered past is actually a network of trade routes, and ideas are the cargo. Advantage 2, you are immune to the expert's disease. Remember cognitive entrenchment, the way deep expertise hardens into rigidity? Now, think about what happens when a field changes, and every field eventually changes. New technology arrives, the rules shift. The map that took the specialists 20 years to build becomes wrong in 20 months. For them, this is not an inconvenience, it's an identity crisis, because their entire sense of self was planted in that one crop. But you have lived through this shift many times. On a small scale, every time you entered a new field as a beginner, you know how to not know. You know the discomfort of the first clumsy weeks, and you know it passes. Dane's research pointed to exactly this. Exposure to tasks outside your main domain is one of the ways entrenchment gets broken. What feels like restlessness is actually a workout, and the muscle it builds is adaptability, the single most valuable trait in a world that refuses to stay still. Advantage 3, you can own an intersection. Here is the math nobody explains to you. Becoming the best in the world at one thing is nearly impossible. Millions of people are competing for that single spot, and most of them started earlier than you. But becoming genuinely good at 2 or 3 things and then combining them puts you in a category with almost no competition because almost no one has your exact combination. A decent writer who understands psychology and knows how video works can build something that a world-class writer with no other skills cannot. A solid programmer who also understands design and can speak to a room becomes more valuable than a brilliant programmer who can do neither. You don't have to win the crowded race, you can walk over to a race with one entrant, you, and collect the prize. Specialists compete on depth where the line is endless. You compete on combination where you might be the only one standing, but every advantage has a bill, and it's time to be honest about yours. The price of breadth is that the world can't read you. Society runs on labels, and you don't fit on a badge. At dinners, in interviews, on forms, you watch people's faces flicker with confusion when your answer to what do you do takes more than one sentence. And the deeper cut is internal. Because you can measure yourself against a specialist in every one of your fields, you always have someone to lose to. The full-time photographer shoots better than you. The full-time coder ships faster than you. So you privately conclude that you are mediocre at everything while completely failing to notice the one scoreboard where you win, the combination, because no one built a scoreboard for it. That is the paradox. The very breadth that makes you rare is what makes you invisible. You spent years building an advantage and then let people who don't have it convince you it's a weakness. So what's the way out? How do you turn scattered interests into an actual edge? Let's be clear about what the answer is not. The answer is not to amputate your curiosity, pick one lane and force yourself to stay in it. That advice fails for you the way a cage fails a bird that was built to migrate. You cannot willpower yourself into being narrow, and the research suggests you shouldn't want to. But breadth alone is not the advantage. Breadth plus 3 principles is principle 1, finish things. This is where we need a hard conversation because there is a counterfeit version of the polymath, and you need to know which one you are. The counterfeit is the collector. The collector starts everything and completes nothing. Watches the tutorials, buys the equipment, reads the first 3 chapters, and then leaves quietly when the beginner's excitement wears off and the real work begins. let's not decorate it. That is not polymathy. That is consumption wearing a costume, and no amount of new interest will fix the fact that none of them are ever carried to the point of producing anything. The Nobel laureates were not tourists in their side fields. They were serious amateurs who performed, exhibited, published, built. So, here is the dividing line. In each field you enter, stay until you've made something real, a finished project, a performance, a thing that exists outside your head. You don't need mastery in everything, you need proof in everything. Principle 2. Build the bridges on purpose. Your edge is not the interests themselves, it's the connections between them. But those connections don't always form on their own because your mind, like everyone's, tends to keep contexts separate. So, force the intersection. When you learn something in one field, ask one deliberate question: where else does this apply? Take the pattern from your sport into your business. Take the structure from music into your writing. Keep the borders between your worlds open, because a network of trade routes is worthless if no cargo ever moves. The collector has many interests. The polymath has many interests that talk to each other. Principle 3. Go deep in seasons. Breadth doesn't mean doing everything at once. Spread across 5 pursuits in the same week, you'll drown and every one of them will starve. The pattern in the research is not simultaneous chaos. It's rotation. The athletes sampled widely, then invested deeply, one commitment at a time. So, give each interest a season, a stretch of months where it gets your primary focus while the others rest in the background. Depth is how a single field pays you. Rotation is how the combination pays you. You need both, just not on the same day. And when you live this way, something quietly changes. The trait doesn't disappear, it matures. The scattered version of you was a field of random seedlings, promising and fragile. The integrated version is that forest we talked about, layered, connected, able to survive the storms that flatten single-crop minds. You stop experiencing your interests as a swarm of distractions pulling you in 5 directions, and you start experiencing them as one system feeding itself. And the question that used to haunt you, "What do I do?" slowly loses its power, because you were never supposed to be a job title. You were supposed to be a combination. Maybe that's the larger truth hiding inside all of this. We were told our whole lives that greatness means narrowing, that a serious person picks one door and closes the rest. But when researchers actually opened the biographies of the most creative people who ever lived, they found the opposite. Minds that refused to close doors and won because of it, not in spite of it. The world will keep asking you to shrink into a label. You are allowed to decline. So, out of the 3 unfair advantages, importing ideas, immunity to entrenchment, or owning your intersection, which one do you recognize in yourself the most? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I promise you're not the only one down there with 5 open tabs and a list instead of a job title. If this video reframed something for you, hit like and share it with that one friend who keeps apologizing for having too many interests, the one who needs to hear that they were never scattered, just early. And subscribe to Psych Tunes so we can keep decoding the hidden patterns of the mind together. Thank you for being here. Goodbye and see you next time.